Hello, I am four corners of the page. There are, for some inexplicable reason, some tongs at my feet, and I'm so glad you're here. There's also a coconut on this chair, which gives you an indication of what life is like with two children. Anyway, today I had a little bit of a different idea for for a video. Excuse the introduction. Um, I wanted to take a minute and not just talk about the positives, although I'm really happy so far that my channel has been celebrating things and uplifting things and being enthusiastic about things. I think so far this month I've talked about Malazan, a series I love, Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm really excited to talk to an author who I really respect this month, things like that. But I also think it is important occasionally, without getting too cynical and heavy, it's important to talk about the books and series that maybe weren't for you or maybe didn't quite catch you at the right time. And that's what I want this video to be, because we're often defined by the things that we choose to put down as much as the things we choose to pick up. So what I wanted to do today is to choose 4 or 5 series. I'll probably do 2 for the price of 1, because for 2, for very similar reasons, I've chosen to DNF, and talk about the 4 series that I'm not planning to talk about a lot on this channel. Again, that might sound a bit counterintuitive or maybe just negative for negative's sake, but I don't think so when you hear my list. I think it will give you an indication more where I stand as a reader, as someone who still has a very kind of small channel that is very much growing at this stage. And thank you very much, by the way, for 100 subscribers. I'm just delighted. I'm having a really good time. So, that is hazelnut coffee, and it is dreadful, by the way. Let's get started on the 4 or 5 book series that I don't plan to talk about on this channel, kind of for very different reasons. And the first one I'm going to start with is one that I mentioned in my previous video. 2 of these I did mention very briefly in my February TBR, so forgive me for that. But the first one is Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, which I actually finished last night. Now, do I think Wind and Truth is a bad book? No. Do I think it is a great book? No. For me, wrapping up Wind and Truth, I realised that I was just in the middle, literally, of the controversy that has kind of been brewing around Wind and Truth, if you've been following the Stormlight Archive book number 5. I don't think that book needs any introduction. I enjoyed parts of it. There were parts of it I did think were quite clunky. I think in particular, the pacing was the real issue. I think I commented this on another video. I think there's an irony that Brandon Sanderson had a really good book going and chose to split it into about 50 different shards, none of which fully coheres by itself. Stands sufficiently by itself. But I'm also very aware that with Wind and Truth, there's a larger kind of conversation going on about Brandon Sanderson as an author. I'm seeing a lot of people saying that he is getting too mainstream, to MCU. I'm seeing a lot of people saying as well that they're moving on from Brandon Sanderson. Almost they've outgrown him, which, to be honest, I find slightly, I don't know, patronising or condescending to the many Brandon Sanderson fans who really love his stuff and adore his stuff. What I have here, I've mentioned this previously, is I have my own little Brandon Sanderson completionist checklist that I've been working on over the last couple of years. So blue signifies that I've read it, white means it's still to come. And I'm about 2/3 through, I'd say, at this point. I actually really like Brandon Sanderson. He's not my favourite. He wouldn't be in my top 10, but I do respect him greatly. I think he's got this lovely conversational, open style about him as a human being. And I mentioned this again in my previous video, that he's enthusiastic about fantasy and participating in that fantasy community space. That, I think, has encouraged a lot of authors to do the same. I think he was one of the first really out there, open about his process authors. And I also think he does write a darn good book. I think we often say things about some of his clunkier books, of which I would count Wind and Truth, and we forget that there's actually some really spectacular stuff going on. I've got a video percolating in the background that I think I'll do about maybe 4 or 5 Brandon Sanderson hidden gems. I've got another idea about 4 or 5 maybe controversial Brandon Sanderson opinions that I have. I do think he's an author worth exploring, but I'm not very interested in the discourse around Wind and Truth itself. I do find that it's become a bit overblown. It's become its own storm just by people talking about it. And I'm sure Brandon Sanderson, lovely guy that he is, understands that's part of being famous, isn't it? That's part of having a following that large, is that if something doesn't quite hit the note you're expecting, that criticism is part of being as huge as he is. But for me, I think that there's more to be said about Brandon Sanderson than just what is currently happening around Wind and Truth. I don't know, a year from down the line, will this conversation be a bit dated? But for me, I'm not going to talk about Wind and Truth that much. The second, I'm going to get... Yeah, I'm going to get the tough one out of the way. The second book series that I'm not going to talk about on this channel is Sandman by Neil Gaiman. And apologies for the tone shift. I want to preface this by saying that if you are... Oh, I want to preface like this, like 3 different ways. First thing I'll say is it's extremely trite and narcissistic of me, and I feel like to bring this up in the context of my own sadness, because obviously there's people with the Neil Gaiman story that's come out who have really been exposed to horrific stuff. And for me to sit down in front of my sofa and talk about how I'm personally affected by it does seem a bit trite, a bit shallow. So I'll make this one quick. Will I probably read Sandman again? Privately, yes. I read the Sandman comic series at a really important time in my life. I was going through my teacher training, and I had very, very little time in the day. It was all lesson plans in the evening, observations in the morning, and I read a bit of Sandman every night. I had the nice, lovely box set, and I've since taught Coraline, and I've taught Norse mythology, and I really appreciated Neil Gaiman's work so much. And of course, with all the stories that have come out, we're all of the fans of Sandman and Neil Gaiman are left in this quandary, right? Like, what do we do now? Or should we keep consuming this stuff? Can we buy any of it? Should we? Is it immoral to do so? Is it immoral should we just walk away? And I don't have any of the answers. But what I do know is, as someone who works in education, it would be, I think, foul of me to talk very positively about a series by an author who has hurt so many people in such a specific way. And that's kind of where that comes down for me. And I'm sorry if that sounds performative or anything like that. I can't. You will see me mention Sandman now and again, but will I ever make a dedicated video on it? No. And that's just how that is. So Sandman is another series that, very unfortunately, I don't think I will be talking about on this channel, although I love it dearly, and for what it is. And I guess there's a silver lining there that it was actually collaborated on by so many people. But whether I'll read it again myself, I think so, but it's not something that I think I can pick up right now. But moving on, we're going to go back to poor Brandon Sanderson, because the next series I want to talk about, that I will never talk about again, potentially, is The Wheel of Time. I actually have 2 copies of The Wheel of Time here. I've got Towers of Midnight here, and I've got The Gathering Storm. I have been meaning to finish The Wheel of Time for years. I started the series in 2017. I got through about book 4 before I switched to the audiobook, and I got to about book 10 on the audio. I think I finished, what is it? Remind me. Yeah, Crossroads of Twilight. I finished Crossroads of Twilight, which I believe is seen as the biggest sloggy of the books. So I have 1 more Robert Jordan and 3 more Brandon Sandersons to go, and I will finish it. But I think I'm just going to finish it on my own terms. The fandom of The Wheel of Time, I adore the fandom of The Wheel of Time, because they know exactly what the series is and exactly what the series isn't. And I think if I had read The Wheel of Time at a certain point in my life, I would have adored it. But I feel like for me, The Wheel of Time is this ship that has kind of sailed into the distance. And now when I read it now, I don't get that same sense of excitement. And sometimes it does become a bit of a trudge for me. But it is such an influential series that I don't want to DNF it. I just have to find it. And of course I have to finish it for my Brandon Sanderson checklist, of course. Because where am I without my Brandon Sanderson checklist? But it's not a series that I am enthusiastic enough to give a dedicated space on my channel when there's so many better people who love this series and can talk about it so eloquently. It's just something that I think is not for me, and I will get to the end of it, and I will appreciate it for what it is. But there's other stuff that interests me more that I can be enthusiastic about. And number 4 is very similar. I'm just going to touch on it for about 20 seconds. The Witcher. It's a very similar thing for me. I think I got 2 or 3 books in. I did the short stories, and I did the first novel, and I had a nice, pleasant time with it, and I loved those video games to death. Actually, last summer, I played through the whole Witcher trilogy, because I wanted to experience what the first 2 games were like. Loved the first one, didn't like the second one very much, and of course the third one is this masterpiece. And I had some moments with the show. The first season I thought was curiously low budget, but also kind of entertaining in its own kind of, Saturday morning live action kids show kind of way. I quite enjoyed it. Kids show that has excessive amounts of all the not PG stuff, but it was good. But again, I'm not enthusiastic enough about The Witcher to give it that dedicated space on my channel, aside from maybe the reference here and there. And so I want to end this video, which hopefully is a bit of a shorter one than my 40-minute behemoths that I sometimes put into the world. And that is One Piece. And again, I mentioned this previously. I'm really enjoying One Piece, actually. I think I was a bit too hard on it in a previous video where I mentioned that I was enjoying it, but not adoring it. I am really liking it. For me, One Piece is kind of becoming this cozy thing that I can do at the end of the day, especially when I don't feel like reading paragraphs of text. I can always come back to One Piece, and for that reason, I'm quite sensitive about what I do with it. I don't think I want to take all that coffee. It's awful. It's so bad it made me lose my train of thought. I don't want to take this thing that I have made cozy and personal and for me, and make it this focus, this nexus of conversation. Unless I could change my mind here. You know, I could tip either way. It could be that I just get a bit bored of it and then swan off to do other things. Or it could be that it becomes something that's actually quite central to me, which seems to happen for a lot of people. They get further in, they get more and more invested. Or maybe it's just the people that aren't so interested kind of do fall off. But whichever way I tend to go, I think I'm just going to keep that to myself. Watch me eat these words in about 6 months, but for now the plan is that this is not a series I'm going to give a dedicated space on my channel, especially when, again, there's stuff that I am so much more enthusiastic about that I'm really excited to get to, especially this month. So, again, for a whole eclectic host of reasons, I thought I would share with you these 5 pieces of literature that I can appreciate. In fact, all of them I appreciate in various ways, but maybe are not for me and for this channel for now. So let me know if you agree or disagree, if there's any series that's like that for you. I know my beloved, which I talk about a lot, Malazan, is like that for some people too. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. And again, thank you for stopping by. Peace.